Good evening, members of council, ladies and gentlemen, staff. I see that we have quorum, and I call this regular meeting at a special time for the Town of Pelham Council on Tuesday, May 20th, to order. We will begin with an invocation, which will be led by Councillor King, followed by the singing of the national anthem, which will be led by Councillor Papp, and I would ask all that are able to rise.
Lord, to whom much is given, much is expected. Grant that as this council meets to take up the business of the people, they demonstrate wisdom in all their deliberations. May the decisions that are made in this place of government be guided by strength and courage. Be with each council member as they consider each policy, bylaw, and procedure placed before them. Amen.
Amen.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patron of, in all thy Son's command, with glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God, keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The first order of business is the approval of the agenda. It has been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor King, that the agenda for the May 20th, 2014 regular meeting of council be adopted. I do note that there are a couple that have indicated that they wanted to amend the agenda. Councillor Ribiak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move that the agenda be amended by adding one item at agenda item 13.1.2, reports from members of council, being a report on the recent Niagara Central Airport Commission Symposium.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Lane? All those in favor of that amendment? Any opposed? That amendment is carried. Other amendments to the agenda? Did you have an amendment?
My thoughts, yeah. Yeah, then we talked.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to add an item under, let me just find my words. Yes, I'd like to add an item under the in-camera section, item 20 and item 4. And that'd be an item dealing with section 239. Oh, it is there. Additional closed item pertaining to labor relations and employee negotiations. Thanks, Darren.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So it's an additional closed session item relating to labor relations or employee negotiations. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor King? All those in favor of the amendment? Any opposed? That amendment carries. Any other additions or changes to the agenda? There being none, I call the question on the amended agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. The next item is the disclosure of pecuniary interest. That is any conflicts of interest that any members may have. Do any members of council have any conflicts of interest they need to note? Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a conflict with item 11.1, specifically the item dealing with Pelham Printing,
Okay.
as my wife's company owns the adjacent property.
Okay. And you disclosed it at the committee meeting, so thank you very much for that. Any other conflicts? Can that be so noted? In the minutes, Madam Clerk. Thank you. Now we'll begin with hearing of presentations and delegations. We have 3 presentations and a few delegations. So the presentations, the first one is by Michael Ross, who's the Prime Minister of the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council. Thank you very much for joining us, Michael. If you would just want to join us here at the podium.
Hello, Mayor Augustine and town councillors, and thank you for allowing me to speak to you on behalf of Pelham's Mayor's Youth Advisory Council tonight. My name is Mike Ross, and I am Prime Minister of the MEAC for this year. Along with myself and 18 other enthusiastic students, we in the town of Pelham community that actively ran events and discussed the climate for youth in the town this year. Tonight I will briefly review for you the MEAC events that have taken place the past few months and outline our future plans for 2 summer events, and lastly submit to you our collective vision for the future Pelham Community Recreation Center. Back at the start of this term, the MEAC identified several goals for the upcoming year and planned what we wanted to do to make Pelham a more youth-friendly community. Our first big event of the year was our Pink Shirt Anti-Bullying Day. The MEAC decided that instead of just running an event in February, we wanted something that would create an impact in our community. Our Pink Shirt Day was a way for youth to have fun dressing up together as a way to encourage change to make Pelham a more inclusive and supportive community. Several schools held events of their own and encouraged students to dress up in pink in support of our events. The town's support by lighting the arches pink and putting pink ribbons on the town vehicles for the day was greatly appreciated. After the event, the MEAC collectively agreed that the event was successful in raising awareness and creating discussion for anti-bullying efforts in both schools and the larger Pelham community. In addition to MEAC events this year, the council has participated in numerous Town of Pelham events too. Just a few weeks ago, the MEAC got up early on Saturday morning to help run the Easter extravaganza at Harold Black Park. Assisting in the spreading out of eggs, directing traffic, and guiding children and their parents, this event has become an annual duty for MEAC members. The following weekend, the MEAC then took part in the Pelham Community Cleanup Day, where while there wasn't great weather, several of our members, along with Mayor Dave, happily cleaned up Peace Park and Town Square, something that we do semi-annually since we adopted the road. Also to be noted, Pelham finally received our very own skate park this year. A youth skate park has been a long-term goal for many years for the MEAC, and we are very pleased it has finally been realized with the help of the town and the Aviva Community Fund. A few of our council members have been actively involved in the planning and design of the skate park, and the MEAC looks forward to being there on May 31st as the official grand opening of the park. In the next few months, we will be hosting 2 more annual activities for youth in the summer. The first of which is Canada Day Ampfest. The Ampfest music contest started back in my first year on MEAC nearly 6 years ago. During this time, it has allowed many artists and bands in the area to gain exposure and mingle with each other for an afternoon of musical entertainment. The concert is open to all elementary and secondary students in the Pelham area, and applications are due by June 20th. The grand prize for this year's Ampfest is a chance to perform at Pelham Summerfest later in July. The final event for this year's council will be a double feature movie night on August 22nd. The night, which we are hoping to make an annual tradition, is always a hit with both young children and teens. As we have watched it develop over the past couple of years, the MEAC has been pleased about how watching a movie under the stars brings together both youth, family, and the community as a whole. While the main focus of the night will be on the 2 feature films, the MEAC is also holding a youth video contest open to Pelham residents. Youth will be asked to create a movie no more than 3 minutes in length with the theme, Make Your Own Happy, a theme that corresponds nicely with our Pink Shirt Day as it encourages youth to showcase the different and unique things they do. Youth will have the option of creating this video either as a part of a group or individually, and either at home or at school. The 2 top videos will be played at the outdoor movie night on the big screen for everyone to see. In response to a letter received earlier this year, we will also be selling refreshments and snacks at the movie night to raise funds for the United Way and the numerous causes and community building programs that they run. The final item I have to bring to you tonight is our proposal in regards to the designing and construction of a new recreational center in Pelham. The building of a community center in Pelham in a designated youth area were 2 items that were discussed at the 2013 Youth Forum. While the Youth Advisory Council realizes that a potential community center is still being discussed and no firm decisions have been made, we believe that our opinions, made on behalf of the youth of Pelham, should be presented and considered so they can be incorporated in any potential design in the future. Over the course of several meetings, the MEAC discussed how we might make the potential multi-purpose community center youth-friendly. The center must have elements that benefit all members of the community, including our youth. We brainstormed ideas and analyzed our top ideas based on several criteria, such as financial feasibility, practicality, potential usage, and safety, just to name a few. The proposal that you have before you outlines the key amenities that should be considered to make the potential community center youth-friendly. our discussions have come up with 3 fundamental amenities that, in our minds, must be included. Number 1, free wireless internet with a strong connection for doing work and browsing online. Number 2, a large TV or projector where youth can watch sporting events or play video games together. And number 3, several game tables such as ping pong, air hockey, or billiards. In addition to these 3 items that we consider imperative, we would also like to see the inclusion of other amenities that we consider to be youth-friendly. Specifically, a snack bar or concession stand, an area to play music, a room for intramural sports or youth programs, youth-made artwork, and possibly a photo booth. If a decision is eventually reached that will see a community center constructed in Pelham, we do not want our input to stop with this proposal. The MEAC is energized and ready to assist the town during the planning and development of this potential community center to ensure it meets the needs of Pelham's youth. That brings me to the end of my presentation tonight. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you, and both the MEAC and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ross, for your excellent presentation. I wonder if any members of council have any questions for you at this time.
Presentation.
I'm just suggesting that, Michael, at some point you will be a Rhodes Scholar, and you will probably be a Prime Minister or Premier, we hope. We're very impressed with your suggestions, and definitely as part of the design components for the recreational center, these are essential items that have become all-inclusive, and you've hit some major points, so many thanks for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Other members with questions or? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Ross. Appreciate it. And I do want to echo the congratulations and thanks. Michael is, as mentioned, Prime Minister and is a great leader for us. He most recently received the Ontario Volunteer Service Award for 5 years of service. This was last Thursday, and Ms. Van Ravensway and I were there along with other members. So congratulations, Michael, and we appreciate your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pass along your thanks to the MEAC. So it has been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley, that the information presented by the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council delegation, which presented updates on the youth group's work, be received. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Thanks again to all the members of the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council. Next, we have Mr. Ferguson, Trevor Ferguson, regarding the 2013 audit report. Mr. Ferguson, and I understood that the treasurer would like to make a very, very brief presentation in advance, and I note that the deputy treasurer is here as well. Thank you, Ms. Hannah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I just want to do a very brief presentation on the report of the 2013 financial results. First, I do and acknowledge that Trevor is here from the firm of Deloitte. Shortly, he will present the full results to council. Just in advance of the presentation, I just want to take the time to acknowledge the Deputy Treasurer that's here that did the grunt work on the audited financial statements and coordinated all of the efforts of all the staff. It's not just the finance department that is involved in an audit, it is all the departments, and we really appreciate all their assistance in getting this accomplished in the timely manner it was. As council sees on their tables tonight, there is a audited financial report, final report. This number has not changed from the projected results that were presented to council on April 4th. So the in-year surplus for the town's operating portion was $42,398, and it has been put to the working funds reserve as indicated in that report to council. On the financial statements itself, I'd like to go through just on the in-year surplus for the consolidated financial statements, which includes capital. For the town's portion, you'll see it's just slightly over just under 5.2 million. I just want to reiterate to council that is not a true deficit in that area. It is the unfunded portion of the capital projects that remain as projects in process right now. They're considered CIPs, or they have just not gone to debenture yet. So that's what that represents. And I will turn it over to Trevor so he can go through the full audit report for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pupil. Mr. Ferguson, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. For being fully demoralized apologize now, because not only do I have a cough, I actually applied to be a Rhodes Scholar and was denied, so.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, I didn't mean that. Who'd have thunk it?
Well, we're very pleased that you're here with us this evening. Thank you.
It's good. I like that.
This is our year-end presentation to council. It's kind of the dovetail in our reporting to you. Recall that I was here in the fall and presented you with our audit plan, and this is our audit results. You'll have to bear with me. I haven't used PowerPoint in a very long time, but I believe I'll be able to get through it okay. So I'm going to skip a couple of slides here and get to the good stuff. In terms of audit findings, there's a few things just to highlight here. In terms of the status of our audit at the top of the page there, you can see there's a number of things that are outstanding. Most of those are outstanding entirely because they simply have to be at this point because the financial statements have not been approved by council yet. The one item of note in there is the receipt of audited statements for Peninsula West Power. The financial statements that Carrie just spoke to, the numbers that are in there right now have last year's figures for the Peninsula West because we don't have their numbers yet. We don't anticipate it's going to have a material impact on the town's year-end results, but again, we can't finalize our audit until we have those statements. So that's just something we thought we should bring. For the other items on the page, I'll get to them in other sections of the report in just a minute. The only other point I'll highlight is around uncorrected misstatements. It states there that there were no corrected or uncorrected misstatements as part of our audit this year. And again, to echo Carrie's comments, that's kudos to Kate and her team as part of the audit that we didn't find any unidentified misstatements.
Mr. Ferguson, we're moving a screen here so that members of the public might follow along. It's in the way, so sorry about the interruption.
In terms of audit risks, the next two slides here, just so you can see, the next two slides outline the audit risks, and they're taken directly out of our audit plan that I presented to you. And all that we've done here is add the column on the right-hand side being our conclusion. And as you can see, for all of them, they've been identified as satisfactory. So in audit speak, satisfactory is a good thing. I've been asked for grades. That's a C+, that's an A+, that's a B-. We're not going to give a grade. It's satisfactory, and that is what it is as far as audit speak goes. In terms of internal control, the page here is here for your reading pleasure. Needless to say, just to confirm that we were not here to perform an audit on the internal controls of the town. We did test the design and implementation of internal controls as they relate to the financial reporting process. And during that testing that we performed, we did not identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal controls. In terms of accounting practices, judgments, and estimates, there are a number of estimates that go into the preparation of the town's financial statements. They're listed at the bottom of the page there around allowance for doubtful accounts, accrued liabilities, employee future benefits, and amortization of your tangible capital assets. Those I would categorize as the bigger points because your financial statements are an as-at date being December 31st. So in order to estimate and finalize those things off, certain estimates have to be made. Other items of note on there, in terms of significant accounting policies, you did adopt 2 new accounting policies over the course of the year as you were required to under the public sector accounting standards, being for tax revenue and for government transfers. Those standards have no impact on your financial statements, didn't change prior year numbers or the way in which the town accounts for things. In terms of audit scope matters, there's just a few items on these couple of pages here that I'll just highlight. There were no changes from our audit plan that we presented to you, so you can take that as good, and there were no changes to it at all. Materiality, we did not change the basis in which we determine materiality. We discussed that as part of our audit planning process. We didn't encounter any significant difficulties as part of performing the audit. If you're wondering why that's there, it's there because we're required to tell you that we didn't have any significant difficulties. We're not trying to raise any red flags. It's part of the audit standard to bring that to your attention. I already spoke to management judgments and accounting estimates. At the bottom of the page there, you'll see some commentary on legal and regulatory compliance. We had a discussion with management, and it's our belief that you're in compliance with all the laws and regulations that are applicable to the town. That said, it's not really something that we go into any great detail as part of our audit of your financial statements. But we did ask the questions, and from what we saw, we're not aware of anything that you should be concerned of. With respect to post-balance sheet events, we're not aware of anything that would impact the numbers that were reported to you. Clearly, our audit report date is unknown at this point because it'll be sometime, I'm guessing, later this month or early June when we receive the financial statements for Peninsula Power. And then once we can consolidate all those numbers into the statements, then we'll be able to get that to you. The management representation letter is included as Appendix 2 to this document. I do not intend to go through it. Needless to say, it's a document that we asked management to sign off on. It's essentially just to confirm that they gave us everything as part of the audit that we asked for. There's no second set of books, things like that. So it very, very typical stuff, and as I would usually say, it's a letter written by lawyers for lawyers. With that, perhaps I'll just skip into Appendix 1, which is our independence letter, our annual independence letter to the town. Quite frankly, this is a standard form letter, which we actually don't have to provide to the town anymore since you're not a public company. Auditors are only required to provide independence letters to public companies now. It's a best practice that we believe to continue to do so, so it's here for you, and just to show that in our opinion we are in fact independent of the town and thus able to provide you with an independent auditor's report. You'll note that this copy is not signed. It's because it's on the PowerPoint document it's not signed, but in the PDF that we sent to the town it is in fact a signed copy, so in case you were wondering. I wasn't intending on going through the rest of the presentation. There's just the management representation letter that I spoke to. These communication requirements in Appendix 3, these are the items that we highlighted in our audit plan, items that we were going to bring to your attention as part of the audit. So we either did that as part of our audit plan, our engagement letter, or as this document here today. Needless to say, there's nothing of any concern. And really, that's it. But I'm happy to take any questions or comments that anybody has. I realize it's a fairly dry presentation, but I think that's probably a pretty good thing coming from an auditor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ferguson. You're a scholar with us, so thank you for your presentation. Just a point of information, I think councillors would have received this and the public in general. The Penn West Power Holding Company does have its annual general meeting on the 29th of May, and it's intending to review the audited financial statements then and approve them, hopefully, at that point. So you'll have them very shortly thereafter.
Great.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Ferguson from members of council regarding either his presentation or the audited financial statements that we've received? Councillor Papp?
Oh, thank you. I acknowledge that you applied to roads. And are there any areas, Mr. Ferguson, that you think we should be working on or improving or making a lot better? Is there anything that you would suggest? Or
This was my first year at the town, as you know.
Okay.
It's my opinion that the town is very progressive, especially in the finance area. I think Carrie and Kate are quite strong. And the things that they're doing are very good for the town. And I think if you were to compare yourself to some of your municipal peers, I think you would see yourself as being ahead of the game.
okay, that's what okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions for Mr. Ferguson? Thank you very much for your presentation. We do have a motion. It has been moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor Keane. The council receive and approve the 2013 financial statements, excluding the town's equity investment in Niagara Peninsula Energy Incorporated, and the auditor's report dated May 20th, 2014, prepared by the firm Deloitte & Touche, and that the equity investment in NPEI be finalized and included in the final draft of the 2013 audited financial statements prior to June 2nd for the final approval of council. Any comments, questions? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you again to your firm, to yourself, Mr. Ferguson, and to staff, Ms. Hanna and Ms. Pupo, for your work on this audit. Thank you very much. Thank you. We have another presentation, and it's Jillian Chappelle and Maria Brigantino regarding Niagara Region smoke-free outdoor spaces. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Thank you for allowing us to be here this evening. My name is Maria Brigantino, and I'm joined by my colleague, Jillian Chappelle. And you may recall that we were here about a year ago to discuss the proposed regional bylaw, which would restrict smoking in outdoor settings where young people and vulnerable populations would be present. I'm happy to be here this evening to share that the proposed regional bylaw reached triple majority and is actually now in effect. And so, just as a reminder, the purpose of the bylaw was to protect young people in places where they were going to be active, to provide positive role modeling, to help people in our community quit smoking or stay quit. We want to share with you that we received 11 of 12 municipalities provided resolutions, and we also wanted to thank you for your comments and the feedback, both from a council perspective that we received and from a staff perspective from Pelham. So thank you very much. So in terms of the bylaw, it will be highlighted at Regional Council this Thursday, and that will officially launch our communications and education campaign. And in terms of the inclusions, it does apply to municipal and regional properties. We did respond to feedback that we received from councils, and so there are some exemptions within the bylaw. Those exemptions are roads, sidewalks, rights-of-ways, parking lots, beaches, and trails. And also any properties owned by Niagara Regional Housing. However, Niagara Regional Housing does have their own policies in place. There's also a 9-meter provision within the bylaw, and that 9-meter provision is for those areas where a parking lot or a sidewalk might abut an entrance or an exit to a regional or municipal property. So at the very least, you'll have 9 meters of protection in those areas. I've noted that municipal engagement has been very important. We wouldn't be where we are today without it, and we want to continue to engage municipalities in the implementation and in managing and obtaining voluntary compliance within our community. So we did have a brainstorm session back in February that staff were invited to help us to identify what are some local opportunities for education and awareness in each municipality. We also met with municipal bylaw officers earlier this year and have established a working group so that we can understand what local issues might be and where there's opportunities to work together for successful implementation of the bylaw.
So we did want to take this opportunity to briefly highlight the communications campaign that's officially launching this Thursday. And the purpose of the campaign is to ultimately increase awareness of the new restrictions in the community, but also to get community members engaged and to start a conversation. So one of the major components of our communication strategy is our community outreach team. So that will be comprised of our students and volunteers. They'll have a really strong presence out in the community, providing that education and awareness. The communications campaign will also be tailored for each area municipality, and the feedback we received from the creative brainstorm session helped inform that, as well as highlighting local champions and youth groups that have that are strong advocates for smoke-free environments. So we selected this particular messaging because we feel it is positive, clear, and friendly, and it's an opportunity to get community members engaged and to start a conversation, and we'll be using social media to facilitate some of that engagement. It'll also be an opportunity for community leaders to be the face of the campaign, and it's a friendly way to socially enforce and influence change, and similar campaigns have worked well in other communities. So in terms of implementation and enforcement, tobacco control officers employed by Niagara Region Public Health will be primarily responsible for enforcing the bylaw. Municipal bylaw officers do have the authority to issue warnings and charges if there's capacity and support from your municipality. Municipal bylaw officers have been communicated a referral process that we'll be using, and we'll be using our existing tobacco hotline to receive questions and complaints from the public. And we did want to note that the public can submit questions and complaints online as well. The first year of implementation will focus solely on educational efforts, because we do know it will take some time for Niagara residents to get used to these restrictions. So there'll be no charges laid in the first year, just warnings as appropriate, and there's no fine associated to warnings. I did also want to mention that in terms of managing complaints, 3 complaints to a specific location will trigger an inspection by a tobacco control officer, and this will really help us identify whether we need active enforcement, additional signage, or education, and where those areas are non-compliance or hotspots are. So we did want to highlight what the no smoking signs look like, as well as the warnings. No smoking signs will be provided to each municipality, and we're requesting municipalities to post those in areas that they feel are appropriate. As I mentioned earlier, the warnings really will serve as an educational tool for people to make them aware of the new restrictions and to make people aware of where some quit smoking support is available in Niagara. So in terms of next steps, Niagara Region Public Health will continue to engage our municipal partners on the implementation and enforcement plans, and we really want to ensure that local needs are addressed, and we're hoping that working group will assist with that. As I mentioned, our launch of our public awareness campaign is this Thursday, and our outreach team will have a strong presence out in the community. So we do intend on monitoring and evaluating those areas of noncompliance and where we can address those. So we do want to thank you for your ongoing support. We're certainly excited about the positive impact this will have on our community. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chappelle and Ms. Brigantino, for your presentation. Do members of council have any questions for our presenters at this time? Councillor Papp?
Quickly, unfortunately, I was not here when you presented in February. Just so I'm clear, these complaints will be triggered by groups, individuals, anyone who feels that they're being exposed on secondhand smoke. Is that the idea?
Through you, Mayor. Yes, that's correct. So anytime if someone witnesses smoking in an outdoor space that's on municipally regional property, they can let us know, and we'll be tracking that in our database to really identify where those hot spots are and areas of concern.
Any further, Councillor?
No, that'd be interesting because we've got some summer events coming up that are on municipal property, and there are people that I've witnessed over the years that smoke. So it'll be interesting to see how they trigger and what the education, whether it in fact changes behavior or in fact it continues. And then I guess the flip side of that, if it continues and the complaints start, then people will be told, right? Is that?
Yes, through you, Mayor. Yes, that's correct. And we intend on providing a lot of education to community events as well. We do recognize that it will require some additional education, so we'll be providing temporary signs that events can post in addition to the metal no smoking signs.
Okay.
Thank you. Do you know of any, are you coming to Summerfest or setting up at Summerfest, for instance, which is, I
Right.
think, an event
That's
that
good
is sort of a
point.
high profile?
Yes, we intend on being there.
Oh, good.
Okay, good.
Okay, good.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for your presentation. We look forward to that launch on Thursday. It has been moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Kersey, that the presentation by the Regional Municipality of Niagara regarding smoke-free outdoor spaces be received for information. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thanks again for your presentation. We appreciate it. Now we move to delegations, which is groups asking for something as opposed to telling us something. So the first on the list is B. Clark, representing the Pelham Active Transportation regarding their top 10 list. Thank you very much for joining us, B, and perhaps you can introduce those that are here,
Well, thank
dedicated
you.
members of your committee. I think you use PowerPoint presentations often as opposed to Mr. Ferguson, who hasn't used it in a while. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council and staff. Yes, there are a number of Pelham Active Transportation Committee members here this evening joining me. I'm speaking on behalf of the committee this evening. If I could just introduce them to you, we have Bill Gibson, Bob Fish, Councillor Beatty, Dave Swan, who's just here, and of course Councillor King is on the committee as well. The staff representative, Jessica Ruddle, supports us greatly throughout the year, and I just want to make mention of that. So a number of years ago, we came to you with something we called our top 10 list, the Active Transportation Top 10 list. And it became a very important document for the Pelham Active Transportation Committee. And because of its importance and because of the role it's played in the work that we've done over the last number of years, we thought it important to bring it back to you tonight to show you how we are reporting on the results of the advocacy and the action that have been taken, not just by our committee, but by residents, by town staff, and by council as a whole. So I'm happy to report on the results this evening. We still have work to do, but I think you'll see that we have made real progress in a number of areas. So just as a refresher, the Active Transportation Committee meets monthly. You receive our reports and minutes, and you know on a regular basis what we're doing in the community. And while we represent the community, we also know that it's important to gather information from beyond the scope of or the members within our committee. So we regularly ask residents for input and suggestions about the walkability, cycling and active transportation here in Pelham. We've been speaking to residents at community events such as the Farmers Market. It was a little soggy last Thursday, I would say, but we were there and we did receive input from a number of residents. We welcome email, contributions, ideas, concerns, and of course we also invite residents to complete something called the Walkability Checklist, which Healthy Living Niagara compiles for us. All this is to say that we're gathering input constantly from the community about issues related to walking, cycling, and safety on the streets in Pelham. Our top 10 list was originally published in 2010, and it's guided the discussion, the advocacy, the action, and the priorities of the Pelham Active Transportation Committee. So how have we done since 2010? Well, here we go. So the number one item on our top 10 list was improvements to Pelham Street. Many residents told us about the concerns that they had about Pelham Street. But since we published the list, we've seen progress in a number of respects. First off, we have a new sidewalk, as you know, added between Elizabeth Street to Brock Street. We have a sidewalk that's been added to Pelham Street from Port Robinson Road to Pancake Lane, and if you've driven by that stretch of Pelham Street, you'll see walkers, pedestrians on that sidewalk all the time. And we now have a signalized crosswalk at Glen A. Green School, which has been very effective. We know, however, that there is still much to do on Pelham Street. We're looking for additional sidewalks, and residents have indicated the desire to have sidewalks on both sides of Pelham Street all the way to Quaker Road. Number 2 on our list were improvements for pedestrians in downtown Font Hill. And of course, the revitalization of downtown Font Hill a number of years ago went to a great degree to improve the situation for pedestrians. We were also looking for a signalized crosswalk at Church Hill and Pelham Street, and that is on the books and scheduled to be installed momentarily, they tell me, so I know that that's coming soon. Number 3 on our list were improvements to the intersection at Highway 20 and Pelham Street, and we're pleased to report that intersection has been improved and was improved in 2010, and we continue to see additional sidewalks added to Highway 20, including improving pedestrian access along that major route. Traffic calming is an issue in many neighborhoods. Of course, our speed humps on Hay Street took care of the traffic speed on Hay Street. As you know, that was a significant traffic calming measure that has made a considerable difference on Hay Street. There are also traffic calming measures planned for Pancake Lane between Haste and Effingham based on input from residents in that area and also from the residents on Hay Street North area, and those will be implemented in the coming year. There were a number of actions that we were hoping that the Niagara Regional Police would take, but we've seen no notable actions taken by them. Crossing safety is number 5 on our top 10 list. We've seen a number of improvements in this regard. So we now have a signal at Pelham Street and Port Robinson Road. We have a crossing signal on Hay Street at A.K. Wigg Public School. And we know that the signalized crosswalks at Pancake in Pelham and Bacon Lane in Pelham Street are on the books and scheduled to be installed very soon. Number 6 on our list were new sidewalks, and we have a number of new sidewalks throughout Pelham. We've been reporting on those over the years. Our newsletter always highlights the new kilometers, the number of kilometers and new sidewalks that the town has installed, and so we're really happy about that. The one route that remains a concern to us is the route to E.L. Crosley. We know students are walking on the grass, on the side, and they're not sure where to walk sometimes, and so we know that that's still an area that requires improvement. The rural areas, number 7 on our list. We had a lot of input from residents, but we have no significant results to report for the rural areas. This is a sensitive area for us because many people live in rural areas because they don't want the amenities of city life or urban life. And so we're very sensitive to the fact that while we might think a street is ideal for a sidewalk, folks who live in that rural area may not wish to see a sidewalk there. However, there have been some areas of concern highlighted for us, particularly that stretch of Effingham between Welland Road and Pancake Lane. There are a lot of joggers and cyclists who use that load. It's picturesque, it's curvy, it's fun, but there are no shoulders, no sidewalks, there's very little road clearance there, and we are concerned about some safety issues there. So we haven't there's no progress that we can report in this regard, and I just want to highlight that we are sensitive to the input from residents in rural areas. Number 8, it's number 8, but this year I think everyone thought it was number 1. Accessibility. This was the best year ever to have sidewalk snow removal taken care of by the town of Pelham. Thank you very much. We had lots of snow, and I think everyone who's a pedestrian, whether you're 8 years old or 80 years old, appreciated the fact that the sidewalks were cleared. It made winter far more manageable for many pedestrians in Pelham. So we've been very pleased that this action has been taken by the town. We've also seen a number of additional benches installed throughout areas of the town and on the trails. As we were out meeting with seniors and gaining input from them, this was often the number 1 item they mentioned. They want to be out and about on the trails or in town or in other areas of Fonthill and Pelham, but they require benches. They need a place to sit so that they can enjoy their walk that much more. And so we're happy to see that 15 benches have been installed. We also now have restroom signage installed on all municipal buildings, so the public is aware that restrooms are available during building operational hours. Number 9, on our list were bike paths and multi-purpose paths, and we're happy to say that and see that there is a new trail under construction in Fenwick. We're certainly supportive of that. The one thing we are keeping an eye on is the trail between Fonthill and Thorold. That railway spur line that's now defunct is an ideal trail and path for us. And I know we've had this discussion over the years, and there is support for this in Fonthill, but there is a bit of reluctance on the part of the city of Thorold for a number of reasons. So it's a priority. Groups have even come to our Active Transportation Committee meetings asking how we might expedite the development of this trail. So perhaps there'll be funding in the future that might help us with that. And finally, the Steve Bauer Trail, and really this is such a jewel in Pelham. So many people will stop and talk to us about the Steve Bauer Trail, the fact that they love it. They love walking on it. They feel happy when their kids use it. They like to see people out and about. And they're pleased to see that the Steve Bauer Trail is maintained regularly, that we've added benches in a number of locations. And this year, staff have been very helpful in that the new Steve Bauer Trail map was published, and now we're including notations about bike racks, benches, and restrooms on the map. So as you use the map, you now know where all those amenities are. One thing we're hearing is people are concerned that we remain develop those connections rather to East Fonthill, and that those should be a priority as we look at development. So that's our top 10 list, and we want to say thank you first off to the residents of Pelham, because without their input, support, emails, cards, and letters, this top 10 list wouldn't have been possible. We certainly want to thank the staff as well, because they've been very supportive as we've had questions, concerns, required information. They've always come to the fore. And thank you to council for your support over the years as we've talked about this list and perhaps pushed, poked, and prodded a little bit to help you understand what we were trying to do. So our next steps, they're essentially 2. We're advocating for an active transportation master plan. We know that didn't make it in this year's budget, but we hope that at some point it will, because it will really guide further progress in the area of active transportation. In the meantime, since we're not quite there yet, the Active Transportation Committee is going to develop a new top 10 list. We're going to put this one to bed as a result of this meeting tonight and the fact that we've published the information in our newsletter, which just went out last week. So we're going to create a new top 10 list. So we're inviting input from residents. They can email us. They can complete a walkability checklist. They can speak to any member of the committee at any time, and they can certainly visit our kiosk at Summerfest, for example, which is coming up in July. So that's our presentation. Those are the results. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clark, for your presentation and for you and your committee's enthusiasm and dedication and commitment to making our community more active. So thank you very much. Really leading us along that path. So thank you. I wonder if members of council have any questions for Ms. Clark? Councillor Durley. can
Thank you,
start
Mr.
it off.
Mayor. Through you, not a question, but just perhaps a clarification. Number 5 on your top 10 list is number 1 in the minds of a few people, and the third bullet saying signalized crosswalks at Pancake and Bacon. That Bacon one is at Spruce Side.
Oh,
Okay, just a clarification there, because people near Bacon, that became a contentious issue, and they are going to be installed, but not at Bacon, it's going to be at Spruce Side, the north end of Spruce Side. Okay.
Thank you very much for pointing that out, Councillor Durley, and I know you've been very active on that particular issue for members, residents in that area, so thank you for highlighting that. Questions, comments from members of council? Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to echo your comments as well by thanking Bea for her outstanding leadership. It is an absolute pleasure to be a part of the Active Transportation Committee, and I think that I speak on behalf of the whole committee. Certainly, your leadership is recognized throughout the region and beyond, and you have represented us well and been requested to assist other municipalities in the development of their committees. So kudos to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Ms. Clark. Others? Councillor Kersey.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you had to pick one item on your top 10 list that has not been accomplished, what would be the number one item in your committee's mind that council should be looking at addressing maybe in the 2015 budget?
improvements to Pelham Street. That is the most frequently mentioned by residents with regard to their children or themselves as they walk up through the community. They want that safe access along both sides of Pelham Street all the way to Quaker.
I see, okay. Just as a follow-up, Mr. Mayor, do you have, you mentioned also be a master plan, active transportation master plan. Do you have any idea on what the cost to undertake something like that might be? Have you polled other communities, et cetera, for
I'm
concepts?
afraid I do not.
Just thought you might have that at your fingertips.
I don't, I'm sorry.
Okay.
no.
Thank you. We'll have to look forward to that in the budget deliberations, perhaps. And staff, no doubt, will work on that. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Papp, I'm sorry.
Very quickly, thank you, Bea, through you, Mr. Mayor. As always, extraordinary leadership and ability to move the town forward. I presume that you want to get that next top 10 to us before our budget deliberations. Is that the idea?
Well, we're certainly going to try.
Right? I would think that because we usually start around the fall, and if there's any things that are for consideration for the capital budget for 2015 or any other operational additions, I would suggest, and I look to the CEO and the treasurer, that would be the timing for it.
That's a good hint. That was a
You
good
know,
hint.
that way the people know that we need to know this stuff, that we can't, sometimes you know as well as I do, that sometimes people think, oh, we're gonna do it. You put it out there and people think we're gonna do it, but we gotta include it in that protocol, so if it's submitted by late summer, I would presume it'd be part of the considerations for budget next year.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Others? I do have a question, and it is about the master plan. As you give us the top 10 lists, I think, well, maybe I'm an optimist, but it looks like 8.5 are we have check marks next to. So we've done very well with what residents want, and certainly with the partnership that we've developed. And in fact, when we look at new roads now, it's just a given that there's going to be sidewalks on both sides, especially collector roads or bike lanes or things like that. And some of that work is going to be done this year in Fenwick and in Uptown Font Hill, et cetera. What would doing the master plan accomplish? What's the goal of that type of master plan?
As I understand it, the first step would certainly be to inventory what we have, to determine where the gaps are. So we may think it's easy to travel from Font Hill to Fenwick, but perhaps it really could be better. And so a master plan would outline for us, would help us develop that connectivity that so many residents are asking about as we look at new developments and at connecting, the current communities within the town of Pelham. It would also give us some guidance on where the potential is for new trail systems, connecting to other communities. The city of Welland has approached us, for example, to ensure that we connect with them because they see the opportunity now that we've both been designated bicycle-friendly communities. How are we going to leverage that and maximize that into potential opportunities, whether it be for our community or for tourism attraction or whatever the case might be. So Welland has some ideas about ensuring that they connect with Pelham and bring people through the region in a particular way. So a master plan would help us with that, perhaps prioritize how we approach the development of additional trails and sidewalks in existing communities. It wouldn't be based then just on pressure points, but rather it would be a planned approach to developing the trail and pedestrian and cycling systems throughout the town of Pelham. So I think it would give us a professional perspective
Very good.
on that.
Thank you for filling in that piece in terms of, and I know it's something the council will want to discuss in the budget, but it's very helpful to get that understanding of how it would be helpful to continue to make our community more active. So thank you very much. We were supposed to be, well, you were at the market, I understood, and maybe got a little wet, but as part of the mayor's walk last week. So I think we're trying to reschedule that again, and that's another point, an area where members of the public can come forward and give their new top 10 list. So thank you very much. We look forward to that. And thank you for your presentation, and again, the dedication of all the members of the Active Transportation Committee, those here and also those that aren't here this evening. It has been moved by Councillor Papp and seconded by Councillor Kersey that the information presented by the Pelham Active Transportation Committee, including the committee's top 10 list, be received and referred to staff for inclusion with budget considerations for 2015. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you again for your presentation and your hard work. Thank you. And now to our last delegation. It is Fred Davies regarding the Supper Market Committee. Thank you very much for joining us this evening and for chairing the Supper Market Committee. We appreciate your work as well, and perhaps there might be a few members of the committee that are here, and if you could introduce them.
Well, I'm going to have the committee and I think these representatives of the Farmers Committee are here too, so if you can all introduce yourselves and so I don't get any names wrong.
Okay, all right, perfect.
The acting co-chair, Supper Market.
Go ahead, Jean. No?
Just a local business.
Okay.
Patty Fagan, I'm not part of the committee, but just here in support.
Okay, and Roxanne. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Davies.
Your worship, members of council, I am here actually as the very reluctant chair of the Supper Market Committee because I missed a meeting, and so they made me chair. But it has been an interesting process as we started this discussion about creating a supper market here in Pelham. But I want to thank the committee for its work. There's been a lot of hours, a lot of volunteer hours go into the discussions, several meetings with staff and with other committees of council. I also want to thank the staff for the hard, and in particular Vicki for her work on pulling us all together and keeping us focused. And the members of the Band Shell and the Farmers Market committees who participated in these meetings. And the one thing I want to stress is that at the end of our last meeting, I said to the committee that while we had some disagreements, we were all on the same team. Mm-hmm. And that was important for us all to recognize that we are trying to accomplish bigger and better things for the town. And I want to acknowledge that while there were some areas of disagreement, there was always a feeling that we are playing on the same team. And I want to thank the members of all those committees for their participation. Council sent us back after the last meeting to reconsider a few issues, primarily the issue of locating the supper market underneath the arches. We went back, we went through this complexity thinking process, and it was an interesting exercise. I think it took us a couple of hours to go through all of the components of this, and we did review a number of issues. Noting first that the arches was the key issue, and also noting that there didn't seem to be any philosophical problem or difference of opinion with respect to the idea of a supper market. So when we sat down, the committee reviewed about 19 different possible locations. And after a great deal of consideration, the site that was decided by the committee and chosen for recommendation was the curved driveway back to the front parking lot of Town Hall. The idea behind that, it was a hard surface. It met all of the requirements for the health department, which is the overriding concern. It had access to infrastructure, was visible, and was easy to do. So after that discussion, that was the key recommendation coming forward. We then met with the Band Shell Committee and the Farmers Committee. Again, while we thought that we were going back with a mandate to find another location other than the Arches, it was determined at that meeting that there were some other issues that were raised, of which we were unaware, but after drilling down into all of the various issues, it really boiled down to a concern about having it this year. We did manage, and we agree, I believe, as a group, that all of the other issues we could take off the table. That it really just was a question of whether we do it this year as a pilot, which is our committee's view that as a pilot project, this is sort of bringing it as an experiment to see whether it would blend nicely into the other events going on. So at the end of the day, we sort of agreed to disagree, but we did get all of the other issues, I believe, off the table. There was a strong view that if the infrastructure were to be built in Peace Park, that if council were to take that move forward to improve Peace Park, that would be the ideal location for a supper market. It would complement the music and the farmers market. Parking was another issue, but we agreed that had to be taken off the table as well because of the parking plan that council did adopt. That is going ahead whether the supper market exists or not. Issues of parking and vehicular movement is still going to be an issue whether the supper market is there or not. So we also, we agreed that should come off the table and give the new plan a chance to work. So in summary, I guess we are at the point where council needs to make a decision as to whether it would like to see the supper market go ahead in this pilot project this year in the curved area of the driveway. We are nearing the point where we have to really nail down some vendors. We want to focus on local vendors. The farmers market has suggested that perhaps some of the existing food vendors might consider coming into the supper market next year as well, and that will be raised as we go forward through this pilot project. So I think, Vicki, if that summarizes our discussion succinctly, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, or any other committee members can add as well.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate you reluctantly chairing, but chairing nonetheless the supper market. I wonder if members of council have any questions for you at this time. Councillor Rubiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. I'd like some clarity as to the vision that you have for what's identified as Area 2 on the schematic that I have in front of me. It includes the curved portion of the driveway plus a substantial part of the lawn. Can you tell me how you see it operating, and in particular, can you tell me what modifications, if any, need to occur to any part of that to make this a reality this year?
I don't think there's a great deal of modifications that need to take place in Area 2. It really is a grassed area that would house the food vendors and one wine vendor per week. It has to be licensed, so it would require some segregation, but it is a wide enough and clear enough area that we believe that it would work effectively for this pilot project. Noting that if in the future the town went ahead with the infrastructure, it would sort of make it a much broader area. I don't, I think we're targeting 10 vendors. We don't know until we get this pilot underway what kind of a pedestrian impact it will have on the area. But because it's a hard surface, it's curbed, it would be easy access for the vendors with their trailers to get in and get out without having an adverse impact on the crowd that's listening to the band show presentations later on in the evening. I'm not sure that answers your question.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. So what I'm taking from you is that the paved surface of the driveway is sufficient of the hard area that you need. In previous discussion, we've had discussions about some sort of flooring that's required, hard flooring, but all of that is met
Yeah,
by
that's
this
off the
location?
table now because it's a paved area, and that's what the health department requires is a hard surface. If we had to move, for example, one of the suggestions was move it into the Peace Park now on the grass, we would require raised platforms,
Yes.
treated plywood, which is, in a 13-week pilot, it's going to be very difficult to get that in and out every week during the summer. So we were looking primarily for a hard surface that would satisfy health department regulations.
Okay.
I'm satisfied, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor King, and then Councillor Durley.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for making the supper market a reality. I'm just thrilled. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Durley.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for
Yeah,
the
and I'm saying I
excellent
support it.
presentation, Fred, and reading this over the weekend. It's great. I just one question, and on Thursday night of Summerfest, and Councillor Kersey may be able to help us with that as well, would there be some kind of a conflict there with things that are going on with the Summerfest event as with this going on? I'm just wondering if the logistics is there, especially for just that one day, and that's the only flaw that I might see in this plan.
Who wants to respond to that? Councillor Kersey?
At this point, we were originally thinking of having the supper market when it was located under the arches. Having it on the curved driveway will provide some conflict because we typically have sold space back here to food vendors. So it's something, once council makes a decision, if this is going to go ahead, then Summerfest will make a final decision on how we're going to deal with that.
That was my point exactly, that the food trucks that do sit in here would be a problem. So, but that is something that you could work through.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Your
Go ahead,
Worship,
please.
The vendors that will participate in the supper market will choose the weekends, or the evenings that they want to participate in. It may not be every single weekend. There will be numbers fluctuating as we sort of develop and refine the concept as we go forward. And it really is key to understand that this is a pilot, so we're going to go. We're trying to respond to concerns of local restaurants and again, being the new kid on the block, we have seen some decline in sales on Thursday because our patrons can't get into our parking lot. The new parking strategy is going to have a huge positive impact on how this all works going forward, so I'm looking forward to that as well.
Thank you. Other questions? John, you're done? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. One of the proposals, thank you again for the presentation. One of the proposals that's before us this evening, in addition to the report, is also the, I'll call it renovations or revitalization of Peace Park. You had said earlier in your presentation that if that were to occur, then you would have to change things up, obviously, because this paved area wouldn't be there, it would be dramatically changed. So can you just enlighten us on perhaps the conversation that you may have had with the committee on that? Just spell that out a little bit more, please.
The reticence of I believe the Farmers Committee and the Band Shell Committee was that if there was a more permanent location with infrastructure, it would be easier for all of us to operate effectively on the Thursday evening. There was some concern and some suggestions that maybe the supper market would operate on a different evening, but that sort of conflicted with the idea of why we want to be there on Thursday.
Right.
So if there was an overwhelming agreement that if the town were to go ahead with the renovations as suggested in the Peace Park area, that we would all coexist very nicely together, and I believe that would be true, except it's not possible for this year. So our vision then was to find the next best solution, and that was on the curved driveway in front of Peace Park.
Okay, thank you. It might be possible this year. That is on the agenda
That
as a
might-
potential, so we'll see what council says later on in the agenda. Thank you very much. Councillor Kersey, you wanted to
Yeah,
add
I'd
to
like
that
to
or ask
speak
a
to that
question?
if I may, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarity, the committee really was not made aware of all of the changes that were proposed to Peace Park because it was not adopted by council. I believe what Fred is speaking to was the wish list that was put forward by the committee before, where the sort of north end of the park would have had a hard structure and there would have been servicing and all of that sort of thing. I'm not sure that the committee is aware of the renovations that have been put forward to council at this stage of the game. So that was not taken into consideration in the
Okay.
discussions.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything further? There being none, it has been moved by Councillor Kersey, second by Councillor Lane, that the findings presented by the Pelham Supper Market Committee as a result of their creative problem-solving session be received for information. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Councillor Durley, you had a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Seeing that we have some interested parties here to this, and there are a couple other points on the agenda that deal with the supper market, I would ask council's indulgence to move item 13.2.4, which is the supper market, up to now in the agenda. And also, there is some correspondence at 11.5.2 that I would like to have moved up here so that we can deal with this, and the folks who are here will be able to see a result and won't have to enjoy the rest of our meeting.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Ribbiak. So that's moving up those two items so that they be dealt with now. Going to call the question on that amendment to the agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried, and we'll now deal with those items. And I was remiss earlier in perhaps some of the acknowledgements. I do want to acknowledge Mr. Swan, who's here representing the Ban Shell Committee as well. So thank you for joining us as well. So the first item has been moved by Councillor Kersey, second by Councillor Lane. The council received the issue sheet Pelham Supper Market, and that for reasons outlined in this report, council designate Pelham Supper Market as an event of municipal significance to be held on Thursday evenings from June 12th to September 4th, 2014, and that the proposed operating details and location for the supper market be approved as a pilot as presented in the issue summary report, and that staff assist the Supper Market Committee in proceeding with the implementation of the 2014 market, and that the Supper Market Committee, the Farmers Market Committee, and the Ban Shell Concert Series meet in the fall of 2014 to review the 2014 operation and present recommendations to council for 2015 operations. Questions, comments regarding this report? And I do want to note that some members of council serve on this committee as well, and they include Councillor Kersey and Councillor Papp. Councillor Lane.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just maybe would like some clarification as to what exactly the staff assisting these committees would be consisting of, for some clarification. How many staff, what staff, and just for my own information.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Van Ravensway.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The staff assistants, staff sits on the committee, and they would be assisting with applications, the same procedures as we assist the farmers market and so forth. We also sit on the committee. Staff, operational-wise, staff is already setting up the area for the other activities as well. So that wouldn't increase.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Anything further?
No, it's fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other members speaking the motion? Councillor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to support the motion. The issues that were raised before us in discussion earlier, besides the arches, had to do with issues of parking and issues of conflict between the farmers market and the proposed supper market in terms of where would the customers come from, how many would there be, would they be able to do the work? There's some indication among some that there's a feeling that the separate market might in fact do damage to the farmers market. And that's something that I've had to think about as we approach this. I saw real merit in concrete ways to shutting or to not shutting the road under the arches. The issue there was that people would have difficulty getting to those parking spots where they could be for a brief period of time as they went to the farmers market and chose what they wanted to choose and leave. Closing the arches would have had difficulty with that. But in my view, with respect to the issue of whether the farmers market is going to be harmed by this, I'd really rather think otherwise. I think that the more reasons that there are for people to come to Pelham, and the larger the market is, the consuming market is, the more variety there is to entertain people while they are here. I think that all those things are good things for Font Hill, for the commercial life of Font Hill. I think communities generally look for ways of increasing traffic into their downtowns, and here we are with a proposal to do exactly that. So I'm glad that we're looking at a proposal that does not include shutting down the roadway between the arches. And I think that on the whole, the proposal is a positive one. It's going to have a positive impact on the economy. I think everyone is going to benefit from it. I also just want to make very quickly mention of the parking plan. I think that's long overdue, and I think that's an integral part of making that whole project a success. It's a gamble, perhaps, in the minds of some, a risk, but I think it's one well worth taking. I think the upside is far greater than the downside. I'm going to support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor, for your comments. Other members who want to comment on it? I'd just like to echo your comments as well, Councillor, and I think we spoke about this last meeting. Certainly appreciate the efforts of the Supper Market Committee to look at alternatives, and pleased to see that you had 19 alternative locations that you very, very seriously considered as possibilities, and this one came out as the real choice that will meet all the criteria to the best, and the results show that. And it is in keeping with the vision of Thursday nights of increasing activity in the area. Now that parking hopefully will be solved with the parking plan, and access by it not occurring under the arches, that access way is open. Now it will be giving a great service to the community, as these local restaurants and businesses certainly know how to do. So kudos to the members of the organizing committee for their patience and for their flexibility in really listening to other members of the community and adapting and coming forward with the best recommendations. So we look forward to this occurring. I do, and I'm very, very supportive. So thank you very much. Are we ready for calling the question? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much for your hard work. We look forward to that supper market. Thank you. I believe it's in order now to receive that item of correspondence. And Councillor Durley, would you move that item?
Sure.
Receiving
Moved.
And Councillor Ribiak, would you second that?
Yes.
Since you did the main motion. So it is moved by Durley, seconded by Ribiak, that communication item 1152 be received regarding the supper market as submitted by Rachel Hames, Nature's Corner Bakery and Cafe. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. We appreciate her ongoing involvement in this discussion. Thank you. The next item is adoption of minutes. It has been moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Kersey. The following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. Minutes of our meeting of May 5th, 2014. Any errors or omissions? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. The next item is consent agenda items to be considered in block. Okay. The clerk has indicated that we will, it would be good form to consider the recommendations from the Committee of the Whole separately because of the disclosed pecuniary interest by the councillor. Any other items, and that correspondence is off the table because we've just dealt with it, any other items that members of council would like to lift for separate consideration? There being none, it's been moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Papp, the following consent agenda items be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable. The first item will be dealt with separately, so the second item is committee of the whole, I guess it's both of those items, is it not? The minutes?
No, the minutes are fine.
Okay.
It's just the recommendations.
Thank you. So thank you, Madam Clerk. So it is the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of May 5th, which was continued on May 12th. Staff reports of a routine nature for information and action. The first is a compliance audit committee, reaffirmation of a joint committee, and this would continue on that term for the election. The second, recommendation for site plan approval for an addition to Pelham Community Church, 461 Canberra Road, and this would, approving this would approve that site plan change. The third is the 2014 debenture request that it be received for information, and we have that debenture request later on in the agenda and our bylaws. We also have action correspondence of a routine nature. We have a letter from the Ontario Good Roads Association regarding minimum maintenance standards. We did have this discussion a couple of meetings ago, and that the recommendation is not only to receive it, but also to allow them to continue to have the investment that we made in that legal case, the $501 would still be with OGRA. Next is information correspondence item, Cement Association of Canada, Ontario Building Code, and several items from the Regional Municipality of Niagara. First, provincial information regarding the provincial policy statement, information regarding the regional official plan amendment, indications for places to grow, and finally, the tax rates and tax ratios and reductions. And finally, committee minutes for information. Minutes of the Summerfest Committee of April 30th, Committee of Adjustment minutes of February 4th and March 4th, and several minutes of the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee. Any items that members of council have any questions about or want to make comments of? Councilor Rubiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With reference to 11.5.1, the letter from the Cement Association of Canada regarding the construction of 6-story buildings, frame buildings as opposed to cement. Now, obviously, we have evidence in this letter of some sort of a dispute or difference of opinion with respect to appropriate construction protocols when it comes to 6-story buildings. I wonder whether we can get, though, an unbiased and factual report as to the safety of those. Maybe someone on staff can, if it would be appropriate to do it, could find us something that would educate us as to exactly what the bottom line truth is.
Thank you. I'm not sure we have staff available to do that, Mr. CEO, at this meeting. So, Mr. CEO.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can certainly look into that and delegate to the appropriate staff and return back to council.
Thank you.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you. Others? Councilor Durden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding 11.5.3.4, now that the region has their tax ratios and tax rates in place, will we be able to blend those and get the tax rates out, or would you have to wait for the educational?
Madam Treasurer, do you want to try that? And I know, I think I spoke about the numbers before, but go ahead.
The education rates are known. I believe our tax rate bylaw was on the last meeting of council, so the rates have been all approved.
Okay, ours has now, this blends through. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
Councilor, just for your information, the blended rate for Pelham for 2014 is an increase of 0.9%. And the increase for the last 4 years in total has been 6%. And compared to inflation, which was 7.4, we're 1.5, almost 1.5 points below inflation. I hope that helps. Thank you. Other members? On any other items? There being none, are we ready for calling the question? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried on those consent agenda items. The next item has been lifted, and that is the recommendations of Committee of the Whole, and it's been moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Papp, that those recommendations be approved. They were from our committee meeting of May 5th. Comments, questions regarding that? Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a brief conversation with the business operator at the location that's under question, and he requested that since the negotiation took place between he, as the operator of the business, who is different than the owner of the business, he would like to, if this is approved, that the payment be made directly to him individually and not to the corporation.
Sorry, I didn't follow, Councillor. I don't know if anybody else caught that, so that when you're saying
The owner of the property is not the operator of the property. The operator of the property is requesting that the check be made out to him rather than to Pelham Printing or to the owner of the property. Dave wants it made out to him instead of to the corporation because he's.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So it's a corporation versus an individual?
Yeah, he's
okay.
the operator, and that's it. It's not a Pelham Printing issue, it's a Dave Miller issue.
Yes, understood. Okay, thank you, and staff heard that. Anything else on those items? You're going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. And we can perhaps call Councillor Kersey back. Nobody's over there. Craig, can you go get Councillor Kersey or somebody? Thank you. Thank you. The next item are reports, presentation consideration of reports. First are reports from members of council. I do have a report, and I thank the clerk for circulating that report. So just quickly, I was very pleased on behalf of council to participate. The town was pleased to participate in the National Day of Honor on May 9th, 2014. It was fitting and moving that Councillor Barb Butters from the city of Port Colborne happened to have a meeting with myself and Councillor Ribiak first thing in the morning regarding the airport, and she was here to speak to the loss of Corporal Tyler Crooks, who was from Port Colborne and who died in service in Afghanistan. So it was very moving, and certainly very pleased that members of staff and council and the community were part of that National Day of Honor. Next is in my report is the 28th Annual Pelham Arts Festival. I want to acknowledge again a wonderful, successful art festival. Very, very active, and kudos as well and thanks to members of the Pelham Art Festival Committee for donating more than $365,000 over the years to the Pelham Public Library. So that's their cumulative total, and no doubt there'll be more to follow. Wonderful, wonderful event in its 28th year. Members of council, including Councillor Ribiak, Councillor Lane, Councillor Papp, were at the groundbreaking for the Pelham Leash-Free Dog Park. We were joined, of course, as well by Regional Chair Gary Burrows, and by members of staff, and most importantly, members of Pelham Dogs, who've been very, very active in their fundraising efforts. As council knows, they've raised nearly $10,000 for that effort. It was a very, very wet day. It was raining cats and dogs, yes. But it was a great groundbreaking to start, and a wonderful, looks like it's going to be a wonderful park. That it includes 2 fenced-off areas, an entranceway, a parking area, a large area for large dogs, and a large area for small dogs. So we're looking forward to that being constructed. I understand they were supposed to be starting imminently. The rain may have hampered their start dates. They're starting, Councillor Lane, they were starting. Thank you. And it's the intention that the park be opened on or around the week of the 23rd of June. So have a great season for, I think we'll get summer by that time, so a great season for the dog park. So thanks as well for all those in the groundbreaking and those that have been very active, including Mr. Ottaway, on that file. Because it was raining cats and dogs, the Mayor's Walk and Talk, which was also in partnership with the Active Transportation Committee, was canceled, postponed, and we're still trying to set a date. So watch for that date soon. And finally, I mentioned it earlier regarding Mr. Ross, members of the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council. But I had the pleasure, along with Ms. Van Ravensway, of participating in the Ontario Volunteer Service Awards. That was on the 15th of May. Congratulations to our amazing volunteers who were honored. Many of them, we had B. Clark, member of the Active Transportation Committee, Bob Fish, member of the Active Transportation Committee, both here this evening, Lance Weeb from the Canada Day Committee, tireless with working with Rotary on the Canada Day Committee and having those activities here for young ones in our community. Gary Chambers, member of the Fenwick Anniversaries and the Heritage Committee. Thank you to Gary. To Jerry Burkout for his efforts for more than 20 years with the Pelham Food Drive. Doug Freeland, Fawn Hill and District Kinsman, a real driver behind the home show and many other initiatives of the Kinsman. Michael Ross, we've already commented, and Kit Segal, who just turned 18 last week and a member of the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council, who has a number of years as well. So thank you to our amazing volunteers. We certainly honor them very, very well each fall, but it's wonderful that we can also put names forward for the Ontario Volunteer Service Awards, and no doubt we'll continue to do that in the years to come. Thank you very much. That is my presentation. It has been moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Kersey, that my report to Council for May 20th be received for information. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Council will recall we added an item to the agenda, and it's a report from Councillor Ribiak. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On May 15th, last Thursday, the Niagara Central Airport Commission set the stage for its applications for support from partner municipalities, the region, as well as the province and the feds, by holding a symposium to report on the airport's economic impact, a synopsis of the airport's current state, and the significant challenges the airport will be facing in the near term. The symposium was attended by the mayors of the partner municipalities of Welland, Port Colborne, Wainfleet, and Pelham, as well as representatives of the region, the business community, and airport resident stakeholders. Those in attendance heard a brief history of the airport, a report on the airport's current role and the vision of its future, the economic impact of the airport as prepared by consultant David Archbold, a description of the immediate challenges and their estimated costs, as well as presentations from tenants like the Niagara Skydive Centre, the 87 Eagle Squadron Air Cadets, Accipiter, and hangar owners explaining why they want to be located at the Niagara Central Airport and their expectation of the airport's bright future. They also heard that the airport makes a significant economic contribution to the partner municipalities and the region generally, as evidenced by its impact, which was estimated to have been $20 million in the last 10 years and projected conservatively to be $36 million in the next 5 years. It was my pleasure as this council's representative on the Niagara Central Airport Commission to have participated in the symposium, and I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and our CAO, Mr. Ottaway, for attending this important event. And that's my report. I welcome any questions or comments that you may have.
Thank you very much, Councillor, for your work and your leadership and on that airport commission. And certainly members of the commission have talked to me and said that you're a wonderful asset to the commission. So thank you very much for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Perhaps you can make that report available to all members of council, and we can have it included in the minutes, so all members of council will have that. The councillor asked if there's any questions by members of council. I don't know if there are at this point, but you'll certainly continue to keep us informed on the activities at the airport. Thank you very much, and very, very bright future for the airport. Thank you very much, councillor, for your work.
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you. It has been moved by Councillor Ribiak, second by Councillor King, that Councillor Ribiak's report regarding the Niagara Central Airport Commission be received for information. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you again. The next is presentation and consideration of reports requiring action from staff. The first one has been moved by Councillor Kersey, second by Councillor Lane. The council received the issue summary report, development and implementation of new administrative municipal penalty system for parking infractions, and that council review the draft bylaw and recommend that it be considered for approval at June 2nd, 2014 regular meeting of council. Questions, comments regarding this particular report? Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I guess I'm just trying to get my head around these proposed fees that are on this schedule. And I can't help but notice that for whatever reason that we want to be number one in Pelham with the price of these fines. And in some cases, we want to be number one in all of the area. And I just wonder what rationale went into determining these particular amounts that have been proposed.
Thank you very much. I see Mr. Genesee's here. Mr. Genesee.
Mr. Mayor. Basically, the original bylaw was drafted, I believe, in 1989, and I could not find any amendments that any of the fines have been increased since that date, except for possibly the accessibility parking fine, which was raised to $300 for handicap spots, and the fire lane penalty as well was raised at some point. The new fine amounts are basically based on, there are going to be some expenses in regarding to the hearings and the appeal process for tickets now that the municipality is going to have to absorb. So the new fines will help alleviate some of those costs. We will have to have a higher hearing officer. A review officer will also have to review parking infractions as well. And there will be costs associated with that. And hopefully some of these fines will offset that.
Thank you, Councillor.
Fine for now, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Others? Councillor Kersey and then Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, perhaps to Craig. One thing I'm not quite clear on, in two sections where we talk about the appeal period, the review by the screening officer, and then there's a subsequent appeal period. My understanding is from the way I read it anyway, they have 15 days after the notice, and yet the very next clause talks about having 30 days in which to request an extension. So on the 16th, I don't understand how they can appeal it, but their cutoff is 15 days, but they could request an extension on the 16th or through the 30th day. It seems like a conflict to me.
Mr. Jennison?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's actually required by the Provincial Offences Act, that we have that option in place. It's mandated by the province. So for whatever reason, if somebody doesn't pay the fine within 15 days, they can ask for an extension. We are mandated by law to have that included in our bylaw. They have it right now in the provincial offences courts. They are allowed to do that as well. If for any reason they don't pay their ticket within 15 days, they can ask for an extension. I believe they actually have 20 days through the provincial offences court, and we are only mandated for an extra 15 days.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Anything for, Councillor Ribbiak, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wonder whether our officer might remind us of how many parking tickets are actually issued in the course of a month or over the course of a typical year.
Mr. Mayor, I believe under 200 a year, actually. The majority are in the winter time for regarding snow removal, parking on the streets during storms, things like that. The only real tough tickets that we really enforce with zero tolerance are accessibility parking spots and the fire lane parking violations as well. We're fairly lenient on everything else, and we tend to give warnings rather than issue citations, but on the average about 200 a year, including all the winter ones.
Okay.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, so on the basis of that, has some estimate been made as to how much additional work will be done by staff? What percentage of full-time employee will be dedicated then to the screening process and beyond as required by the bylaw?
For you, Mr. Mayor. Last year, I personally attended court 4 times for the year. So people appeal the parking ticket only 4 times. So it's very minimal, actually. But we do have to have a review officer in place. It can be presently a town employee. I know other municipalities are having their clerks or their deputy clerks act as reviewing officer. But for hearings appeal officer, we do have to have somebody who's not associated with the town, not an employee, not a staff member, not related to a staff member as well. So looking for somebody, most municipalities are looking for somebody with some quasi-judicial background, a retired justice of the peace, or something like a retired deputy clerk or clerk, to facilitate that area. But it's going to be minimal, but we do have to have those people in place.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Then I guess what we're saying is that we don't anticipate hiring anybody more on staff in order to do this. That's number one. And number two, with regard to the second level of adjudication, are we looking to share that cost with other municipalities or that resource? How's that going to work?
Because we're one of the smaller municipalities, and the odds of somebody actually appealing to a hearings officer is going to be extremely minimal, considering I only attended court 4 times last year for 4 parking tickets. We chose not to share with another municipality just because we do feel that it's going to be so minimal for the time period that it's really not worth having to share the cost for a project that we're not going to be using 99.9% of the time. So really, it wouldn't be worth. It would be cost inefficient to share with another municipality since we were not using that system effectively.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And one last one. So I take it we don't anticipate having a financial loss as a result of administrating this, that the fines that we would be collecting and the administrative charges will cover all of the costs related to this?
3 years straight. Yes, I believe that will be the case. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question that comes to mind. This review officer, would this person be on a retainer on a per call basis type thing? And that being the minimal cause of it, or the minimal need for it. So a retainer, would that be the thing, like we're not gonna have to have a regular pay just on a per call basis?
Yes, exactly, Councillor. The hearing officer is the one that we're going to have to look at for somebody outside of the town. Employment, I mean. The reviewing officer can actually be our deputy clerk, or can be our clerk, or somebody else in that type of position. But the hearing officer is the one that we will have to have on some sort of retainer or whatever, just to make sure that the person is available. And again, how much we're going to use that person will be very, very small. So actually, a retainer probably won't be the way to go. It'll probably be just based on a hearing, per hearing basis. So if they have to come in to do a hearing, they'll probably be paid a flat fee, I would imagine.
That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you. I wonder if it's similar to the fence viewer or the livestock evaluator. That somebody's named and that person would check into it, but they would only be paid if they're called. Is that correct, Madam Clerk, how that works?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, that is how those
Okay.
2 officers work.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions, comments? We ready for calling the question? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried, and we look forward to that bylaw coming to us in June. Thank you very much for that and for your work on that. The next item has been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley. The council received the issue summary report regarding a pole sign at 170 Highway 20 West. And the council approved the sign variance and permit Frank Saravelli to install a sign at 170 Highway 20 West as requested. This was an issue that came up at our last meeting, and additional information has been provided. Comments, questions? Councillor Rivak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to support this. I'm still not really happy with the nature of the sign, but insofar as the adjustment required is so minimal, it hasn't to do with the size of the sign or the appearance of the sign, that there seems to be no basis upon which not to support it.
Okay, thank you. Others? Councillor Kersey and then Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I basically had a couple of questions just for clarity. This property was controlled by a site plan, and I believe it was understood that there would be severance subsequent to allowing this project to go ahead, and yet we allowed a ground sign to be located where it currently is, advertising all of the businesses in the rear plaza. So it seems to me that as part of the site plan process, there was a variance granted under the sign bylaw in that we allowed a third-party sign to be on that property. Was that not the case?
Mr. Genesee?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I do not believe that is the case. I believe that sign was associated with the front business, Massimo's, and I do not believe it was authorized as a third-party sign for the businesses in the back. They may have, the way they designed the sign, that may have been their intent, but I do not believe that was the ruling of at the time, that it was to be a third-party sign.
Okay, so as a follow-up to that, then, Mr. Mayor, is it our understanding that the ground sign that currently is on the property will be rendered back then only to advertise Massimo's? And all of those sub-businesses will be
So
removed
on
from that
the
sign?
other property?
Right.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes, okay. Mr. Genesee?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I would imagine that would be the case. Unfortunately, we're talking about a different owner. We're talking that the person with this sign is the person on the agenda this evening, and then the other sign is owned by Massimo's. So I don't know what, I believe Massimo's let this gentleman advertise on that sign until he had his own sign in place. That's my understanding. Yes, I would believe that sign would only be used for Massimo's, and then the other sign would be for the businesses in the rear.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Lane?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would question as a neighbor to the west of this particular sign, has he been talked to or questioned about the desire to have this sign there? Do we know that?
Mr. Genesee?
I'm not aware of that.
And a follow-up, if I might, Mr. Mayor. When this unit in the back was purchased and or built or whatever, would the people not know that there's a sign bylaw that would prevent them from putting this sign out in front? Would that be part of the construction and or development of that plaza?
Mr. Genesee, can you answer that question?
I can't answer that question because I can't speak for the people if they would have known or not known at that time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor?
Yeah.
I don't know if, Mr. CAO, you're not able to assist any further?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To answer the councilor's question, I wasn't directly involved in this particular file. However, during the site plan process, as Councilor Christie's pointed out, signs are normally dealt with in that during that process. Because of the oddity of the lot, it was figured that we wouldn't be able to allow the sign without a variance, and that's why the application's been made to council.
Okay, thank you. Councillor?
Based on what I've heard here today, I will not be supporting this. I just don't think it's the place for the sign. I don't think it's, it just doesn't fit for me, and I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Ribbiak?
Thank you. In the course of this discussion, I've had a thought, and I just wondered whether I could ask a question to clarify it. It was my assumption that the sign would also serve to advertise Massimo's? Or am I hearing that there's the potential of a second sign hard behind this sign?
Mr. Chansey?
There is a presence sign on Massimo's property now. That sign, from what I understand, is to remain at that location. It can advertise Massimo's, I presume, but that is owned by Massimo's, not by this gentleman.
Does that help, Councillor?
I guess it complicates the issue for me, Mr. Mayor. It really does. My assumption had been, if I may just comment, that this was the sign for that development, and that this sign was being proposed and it would kind of replace the sign that was there, because of course the sign that's there has a number of other businesses on it. The fact that, that we may be looking at two signs hard behind one another, and I guess there's a competition for airspace as much as there is competition for anything else, the next sign may be even bigger and bolder. So I may well need to reconsider where I stand on this issue. Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Mayor.
thank you. Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The complicating issue here is that there's two owners on a property that's, one has a very large frontage and one has a extremely small frontage, and this is the challenge. Any person in the bylaw says that if you have a property, you can have one sign on that property. So, in fact, one sign on the property that's occupied by Massimo is Massimo's, and the other owner is looking for something to advertise his because he is a separate owner. He has nothing to do with Massimo. So, in fact, this is another property, and that sign, he has a right to put that sign up on that property. However, the question is, he needs a variance in order to do it. So this is the clarifying part of it. There are two separate properties, so there can be two separate signs.
Thank you. Others? Mr. Genesee, was a variance ever sought for the third-party requirement? So right now, that sign that's on, we've used it, so the Massimo's property does contain third-party signs. Was it ever an option that that would be a variance, or would that require a bylaw change or something? It really does seem that it's a very, very odd situation with this very narrow strip of land, and not even for a vehicle. I thought usually you had to allow a vehicle to go through. So was that ever one of the considerations, or is that just a huge can of worms?
I believe it was a consideration. I believe there was communication between this applicant and the owners of Massimo's for this gentleman to use that sign for, but that is not permitted in our bylaws as well. You cannot have a third-party sign in our bylaws.
Right.
So that's why it's probably gone to this option.
Let me nuance my question. This sign is not allowed under our bylaws, the one that's being proposed, and a variance is being sought.
Yes.
Can a variance be used for that other sign, or is that of such a substantial nature, no advertising on third-party signs, that it would require, I don't know, something bigger and greater than a variance?
It may open up a precedent that I don't think has been set before.
Okay.
Regarding third-party advertising on signs. Is
That's
it
fair.
possible? Probably.
Okay, I appreciate that.
It may set a precedent for the future as well.
Yeah.
Which
Okay.
may not be.
I appreciate that answer. I guess the challenge I'm having with this is, and Councillor Kersey raised it and others have spoken to it, that do we have, I'll call it a guarantee for lack of a better word, but a guarantee that those other signs on the Massimo's property, those third-party signs will then be removed if this goes up? Will that be a matter of enforcement, or, and so can we just hear that?
Absolutely. I think that should be, that's why I think maybe this should come back again, because I think that should be a consideration. It should be an option that if this sign goes up, that other side should technically come down. Massimo's has a large, I mean, on their building, there's a large sign there, so do they need this smaller sign there? I don't think they do. So.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking about the smaller ones underneath the other sign, is what I was thinking about. Councillor Durley, maybe I've opened a can of worms here. Councillors now want to comment.
Bylaws are enforced on a complaint basis, so if somebody complains, it will have to be removed. So that's a simple
I
question.
don't know why they would advertise the businesses in the back on both signs. It doesn't make much sense to me that they would do that.
All right, thank you. Councillor Papp, did you want to?
No, that was I think you answered the question, trying to, because Moss has got his own sign. So he should just advertise his business, and any of the other secondary businesses should be placed on this other sign on this person's property. Why you would, yeah. So are you suggesting through you, Mr. Mayor, you want to talk to Mr. Tomassimo, or, and then bring this back, or do you?
Yeah, Mr. Genesee used the word bring back, so what
So I'm trying to
did you
understand,
mean by that?
what do you mean by that?
If I may, I've just received some information from our treasurer. Maybe Mrs. Pubo could say a couple things. She might have some information that I don't have.
Okay,
actually.
Madam Treasurer?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. It has been acknowledged that the sign underneath Massimo's, that's third party, will be removed. That will be done right away as if the sign is approved to go forward.
Okay, and you have,
I'm sorry, I was just involved in some of the aspects of the application process because of the financial side, and I was privy to that information.
okay, thank you, that's helpful. Thank you for that. Councillor Papp?
So in fact, there is an acknowledgement and a confirmation that the owner of Massimo's understands it'll be his sign only, along with this other sign. So that is clear, it's clear. So, okay?
Okay.
All right.
That's helpful, thank you all.
That's helpful.
Councillor Lane?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as a follow-up, they're asking for two particular variances, as I understand it. One is a setback from the highway, and one is a setback from the property. Okay. I can understand the setback from the property being a little narrow strip, but I do question why we have to have a setback from the highway, why it can't be put back where it should be from the highway. I don't see as having to have both of those particular changes. I can see the change from the neighbors, the side yard, if you will, but I don't see it from the highway.
Thank you. I'm not sure that that's the case. I believe, and we'll get Mr. Genesee, the setback from the frontage, it says yes there, that it does comply. Mr. Genesee?
I think so.
But it's a setback from the property lines?
Well, there was two.
Am I reading this correct?
It's
Mr. Genesee?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The frontage does not comply, and the setback from the property lines does not comply. So, yes, the frontage would be from the road allowance.
It's not the frontage, it says 60 meters is the minimum, so the frontage, that's the width. Is it not the next one, setback from frontage, 3 meters?
Yes.
So it does comply?
Yeah.
So it is confusing.
Yes, it appears so.
That's huge.
I don't want it back from the road as far as possible.
They're in compliance with that.
So just for clarity, Mr. Genesee, the setback from the road allowance from the highway, the minimum is 3 meters, and that is met. It's just the setback from the property lines. Is that correct?
That's what it appears to be. I'm sorry, I did not prepare this. So it's hard for me to speak to these numbers to you.
Okay.
But it does appear
Gail?
that it does comply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can answer the question. That is correct. Your statement is correct.
Okay, thank you. Counselor?
Yeah.
So it is just the one?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that I'm concerned about the neighbor who runs the auto shop on there, okay? Who has vehicles going in and out and whatever. And if this sign is too close to his property line, is it possible somebody's gonna lose a side mirror going in, going out of his particular parking lot or whatever? This is my concern on the side setback. And that's why I was questioning, has the neighbor been spoken to about it so that he knows what's going on? That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor. Anything further? Are you ready for calling the question? All those in favor? All those opposed? All right, it's defeated. So the receipt is defeated or
Very interesting.
Still receive the report if you wanted to do that separately.
I'm just asking, the motion was to receive the report and to approve the sign variance. Can we have a motion to, because we now defeated it, we should have divided it perhaps. So we do need a motion to receive the summary report. So moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Kersey, that we receive the report. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you very much. The next item is 13.23. It's been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor King, that Council receive the issue sheet transferring administrative and enforcement of pool bylaw 3389 2013. The staff be directed to prepare the required bylaw amendments to the pool bylaw for consideration of the June 2nd, 2014 council meeting. Questions, comments? Councillor Ribbiak, Councillor Kersey.
Mayor, just a question. It appears, based on this, that there are no standards in the building code for pools, which is why it's not going to be enforced by building.
Mr. CEO?
That's correct. The bylaw, this is a bylaw issue, so the bylaw had been drafted at the time when the bylaw officer reported to the CBO. This, after discussion with the Director of Planning and the Fire Chief and the CBO, was determined there is no actual role for a chief building official in this, so it's more of a housekeeping item just to keep up with our reorganizational structure.
Thank you. That was just a question to, I guess, register my surprise that there are in fact no building code issues regarding, to govern the installation of pools. So if there aren't, then I see no objection to moving it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kersey, Durley, Papp.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, through you. When we talked about the environmental bylaw, one of the things we talked about is the impact of pool construction on neighborhoods and drainage in that area. Will we be seeing a reference to the impact of grading, altered grading during the construction of the pool in the new bylaw as it comes forward to us?
Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To answer the councillor's question, yeah, the application will still be circulated internally for comment, so it's just who's handling it. The bylaw officer currently does it, so it's just a matter of deferring the authority to from the CBO to the bylaw officer, but the circulation will be the same. The commenting will still be the same as well. And I should also clarify, Mr. Mayor, that building is involved to some extent if there is auxiliary structures with pools such as pump houses and other things, but the pool itself is not covered in the building code.
But decking might.
It might. If it's an above-ground pool, and it depends on the type, but yeah, that's something that would be, but that's considered a separate issue under the bylaw.
Okay, Councillor.
So, just for clarity, Mr. CAO, through you, Mr. Mayor, the circulation, the expectation would be on circulation that there would be comments from planning, et cetera, with reference to drainage and grading during the construction, or should we have something specific in the pool bylaw that specifically states that there would not be a negative impact on altered grades with reference to the adjacent properties?
Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't believe it's required. I understand what your comment is. It's something that we would certainly review. The circulation would be in part planning and part public works. So, obviously those issues would be notified during the process. So we have to remain compliant with other bylaws at the same time. So if the environmental protection bylaw, if we're going to violate that, then we're creating a conflict that we wouldn't be able to issue the permit. We'd have to resolve prior to the issuance of the permits. I don't see it as a requirement, but it's a practice that we currently follow.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Councillor Durley, and then Papp.
My question's been answered, thanks.
Councillor Papp.
Satisfied.
Okay, thank you. Any others? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. The next item has been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor King. The council received the issue sheet, Peace Park Phase 1, and the council approved the Peace Park Master Plan submitted by the Planning Partnership dated April 15th, 2014, and the council approved an expenditure of $435,470 from the Parkland Dedication Reserve Fund to be drawn down or debentured, and that Phase 1 of the project commence immediately. Discussion. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, could I get some insight into the Parkland Dedication Reserve Fund and how much money is in it? If in fact that's what's going to happen?
Thank you, Madam Treasurer.
I'll give you my synopsis of what I understand about the Parkland dedication and how it comes into play, but within every development, they're required to put a 5% allocation in either park lands or cash in lieu. So over the years, we've established about $1.1 million that we currently have in that fund. It can be used for the development of new parklands or the regular maintenance and repairs and upgrades to existing parklands, which includes the Peace Park. At this point, the 1.1 million was as of December 31st, 2013, I believe. And so far this year, we've received another $60,000.
Thank you. Mr. Ottaway, you want to add to that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to add to that, the council did pass a parkland dedication policy. However, it's a policy that has not appeared in the policy manual. So there was some, I think, surprise by some staff that we had a policy, but when we located it and reviewed it, it is in fact passed by council, and those are the conditions within it, and we do comply with that.
Well, we do follow the practice of the policy, do we not? The 5% and the...
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thank you. Councillor Lane, anything further? Okay, thank you. Others, Councillor Rubiak.
Thank you. Just some clarification. The $435,000 overage over our estimate, is that with respect to Phase 1, or is that over the whole project?
Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's Phase 1 only. This is anticipated to be approximately $1.2 million project in total. So Phase 1 is this amount. Phase 2 would be tendered over the course of the summer, hopefully awarded by the end of the summer, so that work could commence on Phase 2 in the fall, and that the amphitheater seating and largely the plant work and the trail system within the park would be completed prior to the launch of the 2015 bandshell, which would commemorate the 10th anniversary of the Community Bandshell Concert Series. So in short, we're trying to coordinate, if council approves this, coordinating this significant park construction without disrupting established things, and also considering now that council's approved a new thing, that we would have to try and be very vigilant on how that was scheduled. So that was part of the reason for breaking it into two phases, was that issue.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. So based on what we've learned in Phase 1, are we confident with respect to Phase 2 and the estimates that we're going to receive there? Are we going to be looking at an additional overage?
Mr. CAO?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. The $250,000, I think, from my understanding, was more of a placeholder than it was an actual budgeted amount. We didn't have any idea what this park would cost until we went to the market. We have gone to the market initially, and then we've scaled back to break the project in two. Our anticipation is in total project budget of about $1.2 million. So yes, there will be a Phase 2 that is completely unfunded and would have to be funded by council.
To the tune of $800,000.
That is correct. Some ways, there are some ways available to council. One of the things that council can consider is not awarding until 2015 on Phase 2, and that way it could be included in a capital budget. So there is some leeway on Phase 2 on how to finance it. Phase 1, in order to get the project off the ground and implemented, the timeline would dictate that we need to proceed now. Otherwise, we're going to lose another year on the project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Others? Councillor Papp and then Councillor Lane.
Well, Again, I'm trying to understand the functionality of Phase 1. And losing a year, and when I see the quotes, I'm still trying to figure out what all of this is going to happen here, how this is all going to change. And I'm still not clear. What are we doing here? Can somebody synopsis-wise tell me in Phase 1, what's going to change? When I stand out there in the spring of 2015, what exactly what will we be seeing?
Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What you would be seeing is in the document that you have in front of you, all of the area around the town hall that's shaded in the gray color would be completed. Now, there's various elements to that. You'll notice that the rear parking lot behind town hall, there's a darker shaded area that remains parking. However, the asphalt parking is replaced with the interlocking brick. And then the lighter shaded area that surrounds the perimeter of the rear parking lot and wraps its way around to the front is also interlocking brick. That would facilitate things like the supper market. We had discussed, or the community discussed, eventually moving, for example, the farmer's market to that rear parking lot. Also, yes, that's right along here.
So that would be the farmer's market, not where they're located now.
It's a possibility. It's not something, it could be used for Summerfest and all sorts of other activities.
Okay.
But it's just an area that would be developed for that type of use. These areas, the lightest shade of gray, the sort of triangular pieces in here are planting areas, so they're planting features. And then all of the trees that you see around the front of the building and that would be augmented, and there would be additional plantings put into that. The area in front of Town Hall facing Pelham Town Square into the arches, this element of the design comes from the downtown master plan, and it is also designed to be able to have more of a plaza area in front of Town Hall that lines up a sight line or termination view, if you will, of under the arches. So things like Christmas in Pelham and other events, Summerfest, other events like that could be housed there. And then eventually the plan calls for, as you're aware, the permanent closure of Pelham Town Square into the arches, and that piece would develop to be integrated into the front plaza around Town Hall.
Okay, but if we proceed with this, then in effect, Mr. CEO, would we not be shutting down that access way? I must be stupid today. Wouldn't you, if you approve this, then that driveway that comes in there would be gone?
Correct. That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Is that correct?
The driveway would be replaced by this larger interlocking brick patio area.
No, I understand that.
But the driveway access that connects the front to the rear of the building would be eliminated.
That would be eliminated.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just having, somewhat like Councillor Papp, having trouble getting my head around all of this stuff, especially happening this year, okay? Besides the price tag with it, with all the other things that are going on in town, I don't know, is $600,000 money well spent this year? Would it be better to be put off? Would it be better to wait until we see how the supper market is going to go, and then maybe that would determine something else that might happen if the supper market, for example, doesn't pan out or doesn't work? Maybe this configuration needs to change. I don't know. I just have a hard time supporting this amount of expenditure when in fact it was not on the budget for this year, and then taking it out of parkland. I don't know. I think it's too aggressive in my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Others? Councillor Christie?
I think what I'm going to do is, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to make a motion that we defer this entire matter until the 2015 capital budget discussions. I think there are a number of issues here, but I'll put the motion on the floor and see if it gets seconded, and then I'd like to speak to it if I can.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Lane?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I think the budget estimate of $685,470, and we're speaking about a $435,000 takedown of the reserve doesn't fairly project the actual costs that are going to be incurred in phase one. Number one, we haven't accounted for the cost of planning and drawings that would have come out of the $250,000 first kick. I have no idea what those costs are. We've never seen a report on what the costs are, so I can only presume that it amounts to some significant sum. Secondly, I'd like to point out the fact that all of the user groups of Peace Park, one of the primary things that they wanted was washrooms. Nowhere in phase one is there washrooms. Nowhere in phase two is there washrooms. So we will still have a Johnny on the spot in Peace Park if we proceed with this plan as it's outlined. Thirdly, if you look at the tenders that were sent out, it called for conduit to supply electricity to the platforms where the CAO has said perhaps we could use the supper market or we could have the farmers market. But it also says that the supply of electricity to those areas would be supplied by others, and we don't have an estimate of what the costs would be on that. In fact, it's my belief that there is not enough power in this building to supply that area. It's been a constant problem when we're dealing with Summerfest and any activity to bring power out to supply the needs of it. Having said that, there's a 400 amp, three-phase power supply down by the band shell that with some further thinking could be drawn down and supply power to the balance of the park. And lastly, and probably the most insignificant of the comments, is that we've been working as Summerfest for nigh on to 7 or 8 months now, developing Summerfest and planning where we're going to put the various elements of Summerfest that we use in the Peace Park. If we go ahead with phase one and it's completed before Summerfest, we'll have to go back to the drawing board. And can it be done? Probably. Will it be an inconvenience? Definitely. So I think there's more work that needs to be done here. I think we need to address the bathroom issue. All of the groups have said that that's a very significant and important issue. To retrofit a bathroom after the fact means we would have to tear up what we're doing. And how often have we heard that municipalities lay it down and pull it back up again the following year? And I don't want to be in that position, and I don't think we want to be in that position. So I think a rational thing to do is to defer this till 2015, to gather more details, to get a detailed summary of what the cost of phase two will be, so that council can make a decision based on facts and figures that really have some weight to them. So that's why I put the motion on the floor. I'd like to hear what my colleagues have to say with respect to that.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Questions, comments to the motion?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a comment, and it has to do with just the amount of money. $250,000 was put aside as a placeholder, and we've come back with an estimate 3 times the size. I think that's worth us taking a moment and thinking about it, particularly with respect to what it might mean in the further phases. I think we need to get our heads around just exactly what it's going to cost. I think that the aim of the project is an excellent one. I think the end result that we intend is an excellent result. But I think we got to look at the money and just reassure ourselves that we are where we want to be. So I would be happy for a delay, if only just long enough for us to really understand where we're going with this thing.
Okay, thank you. Others to the motion to postpone it to the 2015 budget? Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question. What is the status of the tender? It's been tendered out. Have the tenders been accepted? What's the status of the tenders that have gone? And I'm just looking at if we have to break a contract, that's going to cost us more money.
Yeah, Mr.
What's the
CEO?
status of that?
The project was tendered. It was the only way to get the numbers so that we could test the market. It has not been awarded. There was 5 proponents, I believe, or 6 proponents maybe, and I made a recommendation on 1. That if council go ahead, I feel is the most economical, and they have the ability to do the work.
So to the councillor's point about are we in contract A or whatever it's called?
No, we
with
have not
any-
entered into any contracts.
There would be no consequence if in fact we did put a deferral on this.
No, Mr. Mayor, there would not.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Others? The motion is to postpone it to the 2015 budget, but given the description from you, Councillor Kersey, it seems like, and given where the number is at, it seems like there still needs to be some work on this plan. Mr. CEO, if this were approved, would staff still work on the plan to try to nuance the plan and work with the groups, or would this just move this whole thing to the budget deliberations and the yardstick wouldn't move at all?
If I understand the question, Mr. Mayor, the work that would be completed on phase one would not automatically require council, that if you approve phase one, you're not approving phase two, nor are you committed to. You can defer phase two as long as you'd like, because the area, the way that we've broken that out is that the phase one will look complete. Phase two will be something that you can take on, right away, or you could do it at a later date. The other issues with regards to the user groups, we did meet with the user groups, and it's quite correct to say that their main concern was things like bathrooms. There was questions from the groups about power. Those issues, for one, the bathroom issue was not included in the park because it's a concept for the park, but it's not a part of the park, if you will. It's a building issue with our own facility here. So we haven't had the opportunity to look at the building audit and some of the work that we needed to do internally. So we broke that out as a separate issue. It's a building issue, not a park issue. However, the committee that we met with, and this was just last week, indicated that they were comfortable as long as the pipe sizing coming in from the rear parking lot into the building was appropriate to handle the addition of the washroom at a later date. The issue around the power, phase one would allow for the conduit to be placed. My understanding is that they would be drawing from the transformer on the side of the building, and that will provide enough power. But again, you could draw from the one down near closer to the bench. It just would put the conduit in the ground to ensure that that was available to go ahead. I'm sorry, does that answer?
Well, the question was, in essence, does this just take phase one? I mean, let me put it this way. The reason this was put into phases, the idea was that the users of the band shell would actually get the benefit of this tiered seating. And the accessible paths, and that the park would be then usable for other things, etc. It was put into phases because it was delayed, right? For a whole bunch of reasons, the tender process, etc. And instead of that, I'll call it very public portion that would be available, the tiered seating and all that, and users would see that first, that's now moved to phase two as opposed to phase one. So phase one is saying, look, this is the part that can be done, and I think you've given updates on this. This is the part that can be done with the least disruption, that can be guaranteed to be done by the time, June is over, etc. And that will be there. I guess my question is, if this is postponed, which is the amendment before us, what does that do? Will we look at the park again in totality? Will we look at a different phased approach? Maybe we'll have phases 1, 2, 3, and 4. Or maybe we'll apply for funding from upper levels of government. Maybe, so does the postponement motion stop any action to those regard and just bring forward here, oh yeah, by the way, council, here's phase one again? Or does it actually allow us to continue to try to nuance this and make this the right park for our needs?
You could certainly go back and look at the design again, Mr. Mayor. I'm not convinced you would be able to break it out in many more phases than what's already being proposed. Ideally, you'd want to do the whole thing at once. That was our original plan. We had wanted to get it tendered earlier so that the majority of the work could be completed before June 19th for the bandshell series. So ideally, if it was deferred, you know, again, it would, I think that the entire project would be tendered as one, like you would any other park when you're going to redo it. You would do it as one project.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Papp?
No, I concur, Mr. Sale. I would rather be done as one. I don't think it's, with all due respect, it's that high of an urgency. We've got multiple aspects of the functionality of the park coming into play now, and some questions that we have to answer about that. So I would rather take our time, re-examine that, and do it at once, and have it done and ready for hopefully, well, next year. I mean, right now, I'm not getting the sense that there's, you know, but we just went through a very long process dealing with the supper market and working with all those groups. So I'm inclined to leave it. Let's look at it, the whole scope of the project, if we can get it done. I'm anticipating, I think you mentioned something about 3 to 4, I'm not putting words, but it'd be 3 to 4 months to do all of it. Somewhere, the complete park. Depends, right, on weather and all the rest of that stuff, right?
To answer the council's question, Mr. Mayor, we would still more than likely have to phase it.
Okay.
Because of the season, but we would phase it in reverse in an ideal situation.
Do it the opposite way.
So phase 2 area would
Right.
be the main part,
Right.
the amphitheater seating, all the changes to the
Right.
cenotaph would be
Right.
first. The second phase in the fall would be what we're now calling phase 1.
Okay.
Okay, anything further? The motion is? Postpone?
Motion by Councillor Kersey, seconded by Councillor Lane, that the issue summary report the matter be postponed to 2015 budget discussions.
Okay. All those in favor? All those opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Next item of business, bylaws. Been moved by Councilor Rivak, seconded by Councilor King. The Council of the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass, and that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the following bylaws. 1, being a bylaw to authorize a borrowing of sum of $1,785,632, and upon issuance of debentures for funding of development charges used in the constructions of roads and linear assets within the Town of Pelham. 2, being a bylaw to appoint Brett Jackson as Drainage Superintendent for the Town of Pelham pursuant to the Drainage Act, and to repeal and replace bylaw 3465. 3rd, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into agreements with 4 establishments licensed by the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario that are situate within the Summerfest licensed area, those establishments being namely Zest Restaurant, Cafe on Main, Wine Bar, Gelato Village, Volcano Pizzeria for the purpose of obtaining a special occasion permit for festival licensing during Summerfest to be held on Friday, July 18th and Saturday, July 19th, 2014. 4th, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter in site plan agreement with Pelham Community Church for lands located at 461 Canberra Road, legally described as part of Lot 9, Concession 8, and 5th and final, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement with the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce in order to establish facilities for overall credit limit. Any discussion, questions regarding any of those bylaws? Are we ready for calling the question? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Council, we would normally move to recess and then go to committee. Does council want to continue with the agenda and maybe do a committee at a different time? I'm seeing nodding heads.
So moved.
So,
Policies and priorities? Yeah, because we move it to.
we'll have to set up another time to do that, okay? So I'll take that as direction. So it has been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor King. Be it resolved, the next portion of the meeting be closed to the public in order to consider the following. 1, item under section 239 2D, labor relations or employee negotiations, 2 items. 2 items under section 239 2E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, 1 item. And 3, item under section 239 2C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, 1 item. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. We'll now move into closed session.
As soon as I finish